Hello and welcome to the OutSystems YouTube channel. My name is Logan Brade. I'm a developer advocate here at OutSystems. If you've watched the last few videos I've made for this channel, you may realize that I like to operate on the creative side of tech. Whether that's showing you how to make API calls in O11 to create your own custom Pokedex, creating a custom application to control your robotics projects, or even showing you how to implement streaming video in your ODC apps using AWS, I like to push the boundaries of what people think can or can't be accomplished with low code in O11 or ODC. Personally, I like to shatter expectations of low code just to demonstrate how powerful and simple O11 and ODC are, especially when they're combined with other technologies. Today will be no different, and we're going to do something that'll really push the immersion of your applications to the next level by turning your low-code ODC applications into full-fledged virtual or augmented reality experiences by utilizing WebXR with A-Frame. Now, while this will just be a simple demo to help you build a basic virtual and augmented reality experience in an easy way, this can be a really dense subject. So feel free to read through some of the documentation that I'll be providing along the way. Speaking of resources, this tutorial really wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for Nuno's Integrating 3JS and OutSystems, a developer's guide, and Owen's groundbreaking AI hack lets you create VR worlds in OutSystems instantly guides on the subject. While reading these articles isn't necessary for this tutorial, I highly recommend reading them if you want a better understanding of creating virtual environments in OutSystems utilizing web-based AR/VR tech. Of course, I can't just copy these guides word for word, so I will be expanding on them by showing off how to take a custom animated Neo model that I animated in Blender to help create this tutorial. In this video, we'll be setting up two ODC projects to show off my animated Neo model. The first one, a VR project using A-Frame and the built-in HTML element component in ODC that will actually run in an Apple Vision Pro simulator. And two, an AR project that uses A-Frame, ARJS, and the HTMLInject Forge component from our friends at Product League. With that out of the way, let's jump into it. All right, so as you can see, we are here in ODC Studio. So let's start by setting up our project. So we'll create a new project. And we're just gonna do a regular app, a web app. And then we're gonna call this, since this is our first project, it's virtual reality, we'll do virtual reality. There we go. And we'll go ahead and create that app. All right, now we're in our virtual reality app. So the first thing we need to do is actually create a screen, and then we need to actually do the import for A-Frame. So we'll drag our screen over. And it'll basically pop up. We'll just do an empty screen. All right, so now that we have our screen in our project, we want to start basically using the building blocks of A-Frame into our project. So I have the A-Frame documentation pulled up here. And in the documentation, we want to try to mirror this in our ODC project. So it's fairly straightforward. It's HTML. We have a script import tag, which is going to be for A-Frame. And then we have the actual elements, which are our scene. And in our scene, we're going to have a box, a sphere, a cylinder, a plane. And then we're also going to give our sky a color just to make it look nice. But in order to get this working in our project, we have to do the import statement for A-Frame. So the way that we're going to do that in our project is actually by using a component called require script. So we'll just type in require. Oh. Okay. And then as you can see, we don't have anything here. So we actually have to import it by searching our public elements. And then it is not a block. We'll just search all elements. And then we're looking for require script. So we'll click on that and then we will add it to our project. And once that is added, we need to actually run this when our screen gets set up. So we are going to go back to our interface. We're going to go to our screen. And then we're going to go down to our events. Click on the events. And then we want this script to run on initialize. So that's going to open up our initialize script. We want to go to run client action. Drag that over, and then it's going to ask us via pop-up to define what our client action is. So we're going to go to the client actions dropdown. We're going to go to system, and we're going to scroll all the way down to require script. So we'll click on that require script and select it. And then it's going to throw an error because it's looking for the actual URL. We're going to go ahead and change the name of this require script just to make it easier. We'll just call it A-Frame import. There we go. And then we're going to put in the URL that is in the documentation. So we will just highlight that. And then we're just gonna do straight copy. And then we're gonna paste it into the URL, quotes and all. And we will go ahead and, actually we don't need to publish, but we're gonna go back to our screen. Click on that. Now with that import statement done, we need to start building the elements of our virtual reality scene. So we have to start with a scene. So we're gonna scroll down to HTML element. We're gonna drag that into our scene, and it's gonna give you a span. And I personally like working with this in the widget tree because it makes it easier to kind of like structure the HTML that we're trying to mirror. So we'll go ahead and do that. We're gonna change the span. And instead of it being span, we're gonna do a-scene. And then we can start layering the different elements. So that is technically done for now, but let's go ahead and add, because if I try to publish this, you're not really gonna see anything quite yet. So we're gonna right click on scene, we're gonna insert a widget, and the widget we're gonna add is another HTML element. And in this case, let's go ahead and create the actual sky. So it's gonna create a new span tag. We're gonna change that tag and we're gonna put a-sky. And then this in the documentation is actually gonna have a property to it. So it's gonna be color, and in this case, it's gonna be gray. So we're going to drag that back over, go to our properties, and we're gonna change this to color, and then the value, we're gonna put that into quotes. It's gonna be pound or hashtag ECECEC. There we go. And so that should define our sky. But now we need to add another element, which is going to be our plane. And once we add our plane, I'll go ahead and kind of show you what the project looks like. So we'll go and add another HTML element, and we want to do it on the scene because we don't want this inside of the sky. The sky and the actual plane need to be at the same level. So we're going to change the name of this span, and we're going to do a-sky. And this one also has, or I'm sorry, a-plane. And then we're going to change that property for the plane. We need to define a position. Because we're in three-dimensional space, we need to actually define X, Y, and Z coordinates. And so in this case, it is going to be 0, 0, -4. And then we need to add another property, which is going to be rotation, which for rotation is going to define the rotation of the plane. So we're going to do the same thing. This one is going to be -90, 0, and 0. And then we have more, we have a width. So we'll do width. And this one's going to be 4. We're gonna add another one, which is going to be height. And that height is going to be also 4. And I think, oh, and then there's also color. So we need to define the color. And this one, for this value, is going to be a green. So it's going to be pound hashtag 7 BC 8A4. Okay. Fix that because I messed that up. Okay. So now what we should have here is our actual virtual reality scene. We're going to have a plane, a green plane that's at the boundary of the, or at the base of our world or what we're seeing. And then we're going to have a gray sky. So let's publish this and make sure that everything is working so far. And as this is building, just to know, the way that I'm coming up with these values is just from the documentation. People have done the work and kind of figured out, like, for the documentation, what is the best way to get this all framed up. A lot of the times, if you're doing your own projects, it's just trying to figure out where you're working from in the origin of the scene. So if it's like the position is 0, 0, 0, that means you're dead center in your screen, and you want to adjust your elements based off of that, like the origin point. It does take a little bit of trial and error, so don't worry if you have to try this multiple times to get things into the right position. For now, I'm just using the documentation because it makes life a lot easier. But now that our project is built, let's go ahead and open it up in the browser. There we go. And here is our virtual scene. As you can see, we have a gray sky and a green plane. I know it's not super exciting, but we know that it's working, it's loading in, and that we can actually go full screen in our little virtual world. So let's start adding other elements to this and building it out a little bit more. And luckily it's fairly easy to keep going. So we're gonna go back to our widget tree. We're gonna go back to our scene, and let's go ahead and add a box. So again, we're gonna change the tag. It's gonna be A-box. And then we're gonna add our position, rotation, and color attributes. Okay, so now I know I've kind of sped up ahead here, but I just wanted to show this off. So I'm working on the sphere, and as you can tell, there's different elements for different objects that we're using. So a sphere, obviously we want to do a radius versus then like a rotation. That was for the plane or the box that I did previously. And so you just want to make sure to check the documentation to see what the actual elements or properties are for each tag. Okay, so now we have all of our elements done. We have our sky, which we talked about. We have our plane, which we talked about. Our box, which is A-box. It has a position of -1, 0.5, -3, rotation of 45 degrees, in the Y direction, and then color. And then we have our sphere, which also like there's the position, the radius, the color defined. And then we have a cylinder with a position, a radius, height, and color defined. So let's go ahead and publish this to make sure that our scene is working. There we go, and here's our scene. Okay, so now that's the basic setup for a A-Frame project, but let's go ahead and do something a little bit different. Let's remove these elements and start working with our actual Neo model. So I'm gonna open this up. So the model that I'm gonna import and that I've set up all the animations for, which by the way, this is Blender, this is our Neo model. And so, as you can see, I have set him up to just do a simple wave, but we need to, and it's also repeating, but what we need to do is we need to get this out of Blender and we need to get it into our project. So it's fairly simple to do this. We wanna do file, export, and then we wanna do it as a GLTF, or basically a GLB file. And what this will do is this will basically take all of our, the model itself, the actual textures, the animations, all of that, and it's gonna compile it into one file. And so it's pretty easy. You just wanna make sure that it has all of the details that you need. In this case, we just care about the textures and the animation. And of course, like everything else is selected by default, so we don't really have to do anything special. We just need to export it. And so I've already gone ahead and done that. And the way that I'm dealing with this model is that I've uploaded it into an S3 bucket in AWS. If you want to learn more about S3 buckets in AWS, my last video on video streaming, very, very comparable with the setup and the way that you want to you just want to upload the model and then you're going to be getting the URL from that model in S3. So I've already gone through that and it's already completed. So I'm not going to show it off here, but be sure to check that out if you want more information on that. But let's go to our ODC Studio and let's actually remove all of these elements. Delete it out. Actually, we'll keep the plane. We'll keep the plane and we'll keep the sky, but we'll remove the box, we'll move the sphere, and we'll remove the cylinder. All right, so what we want to do is we want to actually go to our scene and we want to add an entity to our scene. So it's gonna be the same setup, HTML element. We're gonna change the span and it's gonna be A-entity. And then as a part of that entity, there's going to be several options that we need to include. So let me actually get the documentation. In the documentation, what we're looking for is the entity documentation. So we're looking for a-entity. It's going to be gltf-model, and then we're going to give it our URL. So that's what we're going to mirror in our project. So we're going to change that. We've already set up a entity. We're going to put in our property. That's going to be gltf-model. And then the value is actually going to be URL. And then we're going to put in the URL for our project, or in this case, our Neo model that I've put into our S3 bucket. And put that in there. And then what we also want to do is we want to define the actual position. So the tough part is with these models is that when you export them, you're going to find that like some of them have wildly different sizes. And so you want to make sure that the positioning in your scene is correct. And I kind of figured out through just trial and error that there's a specific position that I want Neo and Vert to work. And that position is going to be 0, 0, -4. And then we're going to go ahead and publish it. There we go. So as you can see, we have our Neo model in our virtual reality setup, but we got kind of a problem. So you can see that the model is actually set up in what's called a T-pose. T-pose is very common for when you're animating 3D objects, and this is not really what we're looking for. We have our model here, but he's not really doing anything. So let's back out of this, and we need to adjust our project so that we can start actually animating our model. So we're going to go back to ODC. In order to get our model moving, we actually have to import another library. And this one's called A-Frame-Extras. And what this has is it's the animation mixer property. And that's what we need in order to get our model moving. But now that means we have to alter what's being set up at the start of our project, like what we're injecting for our required scripts. So we want to go back to our elements, and we want to go back to onInitialize. And we're going to add a new client action that's going to go after the A-frame import. So we'll put that in there, and we will do the same thing, go to our drop down for system, and we're going to go to our require script, and we're going to add a new require script. And this one we're going to change the name of. We're going to call it animation import. Now, in this case, this library actually has more than just animation, but for all intents and purposes, this is what it's going to be for our project. Ooh. Put that in there. There we go. Okay, so that import is happening. And now we need to alter the properties of our model that we've set up. So we're going to go back to our screen, go back to our widget tree, and then we're going to go back to our entity. And we're going to change this property, or create a new property called animation mixer. And then animation mixer uses a specific kind of notation. So we want to define what the clip is and then what clip needs to play. And what's cool about this is that you can actually have multiple different clips. So if you have multiple different animations that you want your character to do, you can actually tee those up in like different order. So I would just say, like, I haven't dug too much into that. So I would say read the documentation if you are going to be doing that, but it's fairly straightforward to set that up. So an animation mixer, we're gonna paste this in. And again, it's clip waving. And the way that it gets defined in our project and kind of what to search for. So I'm gonna show this off in Blender because it kind of makes a little bit more sense, is that when setting up the animation, we have to define like actual movements. So this one I have waving 1, but I've actually created multiple waving animations. And so I have an animation in here. If I add a track, let me see if I can define this. Yeah, here it is. So I have multiple animations on Neo here. And so I have waving 1 and I have waving. So when you're defining and setting those up, essentially just going to be what you call the animation in your 3D modeling animation tool. And it could be different for different animation 3D modeling tools that you're using. This is just the way that it's done in Blender. And so I'm referencing this waving animation in here. So we'll pull that away. But now that that's set up, let's go ahead and publish this and see if we can get Neo moving. There we go. We have Neo and he is waving. There we go. But now that we have that set up, obviously this is just in a normal web application. We want to do something that's a little bit more immersive. So because this utilizes WebXR, we can actually take the URL from this project and we can actually go search it on any headset that supports WebXR. And we can actually go into a virtual world to see Neo up close. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And the way that I'm going to do that in here is I'm going to do it on an Apple Vision Pro simulator. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, Apple Vision Pro, it's crazy expensive. I don't have one. The good part is that if you use Xcode, you get access to the simulator for free. Or if you don't have an Apple device and you want to see this with a different headset, any headset or any device that supports WebXR will actually allow you to view this scene. So you can use it on a multitude of different headsets. You can use it on mobile devices, like your cell phone, if you want to do like a little bit more of an AR setup, but we'll dive into more of the AR stuff in a second. Let's get our project opened up in Xcode and with our simulator running. Okay, so I've opened up Xcode and this is going to be super easy because it's just basically we're going to go into Xcode and we're going to go into Open Developer Tools and it's going to be Simulator. And I will say you sometimes have to actually set this up from scratch. In my case, the simulator I already have teed up was the Apple Vision Pro one because I was testing this earlier. But you can actually change devices and you can change what simulator you're running this on. So if you go to File, Open Simulator, there's a whole slew of them. You do have to like pre-set this up if you don't see a simulator that you have, or you have to download all the different types of simulators. But again, if you have any sort of headset, physical headset, you just have to put in this URL for it to work. And it's extremely straightforward. If anything, this actually takes more time because I don't have a virtual reality headset and I'm doing this directly from the simulator. But I'll go ahead and show you kind of what needs to happen here. Okay, so now we have our Apple Vision Pro simulator up and running, and I want you to pay particular attention to the version that I'm running. I'm in a 2.4. If you're on 2.4, this should work by default, but if it doesn't, sometimes you actually have to enable Vision Pro's like WebXR functionality if you were on a previous version. And the way that you do that is you go into your settings, you're gonna go to apps, you're going to go to Safari because this uses Safari on the simulator. And then you're going to go ahead and scroll, go to advanced, feature flags, and then you'll see something about allowing WebXR in your setup. Of course, this is a lot more feature flags than what's in 1.0 or whatever, even in other versions. But again, this is selected by default already by 2.4, so you don't really have to worry about it too much. All right, so now we're back on our home screen. We want to click on Safari, go to the URL. We're going to copy and paste it in here. There we go. And then it should open up our scene. And in this case, since we're using WebXR, it's going to ask you, there's going to be a prompt. It says this immersive website requires access to your device motion sensors. You want to select allow. This is just a function of WebXR to make sure that you're not doing anything nefarious. But as you can see, we have our web we have our browser set up here, and you can see that there's a little VR option. So if we click on that, it'll ask you if you want to actually launch an immersive experience. And here we go. So now we actually have our full immersive experience. And if you were on a headset, you can actually walk around this scene and see Neo up close and personal. So that's really cool. You basically now have your first VR experience using OutSystems and A-Frame. But now that we have that set up, let's start doing something that's a little bit more complicated. Let's take some of these virtual elements and bring them into the real world with augmented reality. Now, before I continue, I do want to say, if you want to see how I actually set up a character animation in Blender, I'm working on a video for my personal YouTube channel where I talk about using Blender, Mixamo, and 3D models and actually rigging them up and getting them set up for character animations. So be sure to check that out if you want to learn more about Blender, 3D modeling, anything along those lines. All right, so we're back at our main screen in ODC, and what we're gonna do for this one is we're actually gonna create a separate application. The reason for this is because basically to back out all the virtual reality stuff, it's almost easier to just start from scratch than to go through and try to rework the virtual reality example, and probably less confusing. So the first thing we're gonna do is actually create our AR application. Select an app, a web app, and then we're going to change this to augmented reality. And we will create that app. There we go. Now that our app has been created, what we're going to do is we're going to go navigate to the actual AR library. So this has its own separate set of documentation and it works with A-Frame. So let me pull this over. As you can see, it still uses A-Frame, but we're also going to do another library import. And this is going to be for A-Frame-AR.js. And as you can see in the actual HTML, there's some different things that are happening with this than what happened with just standard A-Frame. So on our A scene, we have an embedded AR.js tag, and we also have like a marker. We have our entity, which will be our Neo model. And then there's actually some other stuff that we can include if we want to. So in this documentation, you can see that we have we can do image tracking, we can do location-based tracking, and marker-based tracking. So for this application, we're going to do marker-based, but if you want to try to use other parts of this library like location-based, definitely give it a shot. Let me know how it is in the comments below. But let's go ahead and start working on this. So we'll go back to our application. We're going to drag a screen over, and it's going to be an empty screen. And for this, we're just going to go ahead and actually delete out kind of all the elements except for the main screen itself, which is a little weird, but you'll kind of get it as we work through it. Essentially, what happens is by having those elements on the screen, it can actually cause our augmented reality scene to be formatted in a weird way. So this is just the easiest way that I found to make it work right out of the box without having to do all the manual measuring of distances and like pixels and all that. So this just makes it a lot easier for this demo, but you'll probably, if you're doing a bigger example or you're doing your own application, you'll probably have to mess around a little bit with the positioning of elements just to get it into the right place. So in order to get this to work, we have to actually get our require script in this application. So since we don't have it in this application, let's go ahead and pull it in, very similar to our virtual reality example. So we're gonna do require script, and it's not a block, it's actually all elements. There we go, require script, and we will add that. Okay, now we have require script in there. We're gonna go back to our interface, go to our main screen, and we're just like before, go to the event, and we're gonna create an onInitialize script an onInitialize. So we'll go ahead and pull over our client, run client action. We'll scroll down again to our require script, and we need to include, actually we'll change the name to this to A-Frame import. Ooh, if I can actually spell, and then the URL for our A-Frame import. So now we have that. And now what we want to do is bring in the actual A-Frame AR library. So we're going to do another run client action, bring that in, select our require script, and this one we'll call AR import. Cool. And then we're going to put in the URL from the documentation. There we go. So that is brought in. So the next thing we need to do is actually build out the HTML that can be found in the AR.js documentation. The problem is that when we start building the HTML, you'll notice, and I kind of briefly brought it up, was that our tags are different. So our A-Scene has an embedded ARJS tag. We have to have different markers and presets. And the problem is that if you use the HTML expression component that's built into ODC, it's really not going to work. It's going to throw errors at you. It's going to cause problems. And to build it out manually is actually kind of a little just time intensive. And I want to make this go as quick and easy as possible. So what we need to actually add to our project is a forged component that was created by our friends over at Product League, and that's called HTMLInject. So let's go ahead and install that HTMLInject. We're going to select that and we're going to add it to our project. There we go. And so what we want to try to do is we're going to add a block to the screen. And this one is going to be, we're going to select HTMLInject and we're going to select the HTMLInject block. There we go. And as you can see, we have our block set up, but it's giving us an error. And we actually just have to put in the HTML that's necessary to make this work. So I have a previous project here where I actually set up the HTML just as a test, but I do want to show it off and kind of talk through it a little bit. So I have a div tag with style, position, absolute, height 100%, width 100%, and that just guarantees that everything is going to be aligned proportionally and that we're not going to have any offsets or weird locations for our AR elements. You might have to play around with these settings depending on what you're trying to deploy to. Then we're going to add our A-Scene with our embedded ARJS tag. And so in that we have our marker, which is a hero marker, and I will show you. This is the marker that we're going to be putting Neo on my tablet. And then in the marker, we want to add our entity. So in this case, it's going to be our Neo model. It's going to be a position of 0, 0, 0, which guarantees that he's going to be dead center on the tag. The scale is going to be 0.5, so he's half size. And the reason for that is because Neo's actually quite large, so this guarantees that he's going to be proportional to what's being put on my tablet. Of course, we're going to use the same URL that we had for our virtual reality scene, and then we're going to close everything up and just essentially get this into our project. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, go back to my augmented reality project, and then we're going to open this in an expression editor. Paste it. Oh, gotta make sure that that is formatted correctly. There we go. So the next thing we need to do is run our project to make sure that everything is working correctly. There we go. And then for this example, I'm just gonna use my main camera that we have set up here, just because it's easier to record and I think it shows up better on the screen. We'll go ahead and allow it this time. Here we go. Okay, so my application is running. I'm running it in full screen. Let's go ahead and test this out to see if it works. There we go. And we have Neo on our hero tag. But similar to the problem that we had last time with our virtual reality setup, he's not really doing much. So let's change that and let's get him animated and into our scene. So let's close out of this. We'll close out of our application. We will go back into ODC Studio. So similar to the last VR project, we need to go back to our onInitialize script, and we actually need to add our animation import. So we'll pull over run client action, do the same thing, system, go down to require script, select, and we will add animation import. There we go. And then the URL, I'll go ahead and select from our old virtual reality project because that just makes life easier. There we go. Copy that, go to our augmented reality project, paste it in. So that's the extras. And then we actually need to go to our HTML inject block and we need to edit this. So we'll go to our expression editor and we want to go to our actual model. And I think I'll add it right here. So it's going to be animation mixin, and it's going to equal our clip and waving. Oh, there it is. It's animation mixer. Sorry, confused the libraries. Close that and let's test it again. All right, we're back to our application. Let's get this going. And let's show off our hero tag and see if it works. There we go. And we have Neo moving in our AR application. And that's how easy it is to create your own low-code VR AR applications. Now, if you do try this in your projects, then let us know in the comments below. I'm really curious to see how your projects turn out, especially if you're testing this out with image tracking, location tracking, or any of the other advanced features that we didn't show off in this tutorial in your own low-code projects. Of course, we've got a ton of projects like this queued up, so be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this in the future. With that being said, this was fun, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Thanks.